Honorable members, on the 8th of June, the Portfolio Committee received presentation from Dr. Leon Schreiber concerning the Public Administration Laws General Amendment Bill tabled in the National Assembly. We further received presentation from the Presidency, Socio-Economic Impact Assessment Unit, the Department of Public Service and Administration, and the Public Service Commission to comment on the bill and further indicate the status of tabling the amendments of their legislation to Parliament. Today, we have invited stakeholders as part of public participation process who have shown interest on the bill to provide valuable input to the legislative process before the committee. We will later afford members an opportunity to ask clarity-seeking questions to the presenters, thereafter allow members to intensively deliberate on the bill in order to pave way to make informed determination on the desirability of the bill. With those few words, once again, let me welcome all the presenters that are going to present here today. And I therefore declare the meeting open. Do we have any apologies for today, Mascron?
Good morning, Chair. Good morning to honorable members and colleagues that are present. Yes, we have about two apologies, Chair. One from Honorable McGlure, one from Honorable Command. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mascrole. Can you flight the agenda?
Okay, Chair. Can you see it, Chair?
Yes, I can see it. We have recorded the apologies. It is the consideration of the previous committee meeting minutes.
Yes, Chair.
Okay. Can we, that is the previous meeting we had. So can you take us through
businesses in other parts of the world, which actually admire the openness of the country and the ability of the country to actually engage publicly with various stakeholders on the very serious challenges that it faces. Now, while discussions about a developmental state have been relatively consistent, arguable that absent from this discussion is a clear focus on the accompanying apparatus and capacity that is needed to drive development at all levels of government. Now, good policy is necessary, but it's definitely not sufficient to actually drive the process of development. You need the machinery that is able to do that. There's various outward and inward-looking measures that have been underway in recent years with the aim of strengthening the capacity of the South African state. And these different initiatives are driven by various entities, both state actors, but also non-state actors contributing. But also, I think you've had strong participation across party lines in these particular initiatives. In the realm of international relations, you have the Foreign Service Act 26 of 2019. And this aims to provide for the management, administration, accountability, and functioning of a professional foreign service of the Republic of South Africa, and also to provide for the operational requirements that are suitable and supportive of the operations of the foreign service in a global environment. Now, this is absolutely important to South Africa's international relations. The country has to negotiate international treaties. It has to participate in various fora at the UN, at regional fora, but also it has to engage with various countries. And therefore, you need a professional foreign service that is able to actually represent the country well, that is able to drive and to pull foreign investment, but that is also able to be representative of the country and in terms of the skills that the country offers, in terms of the demographics of the country, in terms of the various political views that are held within the country and the regions that South Africa has a presence in. Now, South Africa is one of the countries in the world which has the largest foreign missions in the world, both outward leaning and inward leaning. So there's a strong interest in what happens in South Africa because outside of Washington, among the largest concentrations of diplomatic community is in South Africa. And so this was an important debate within the international relations realm because there was a period of time where in our research where we picked up that in certain periods in the last years, a few decades since democracy, there were periods where you had about 70% of our heads of mission being professional, being staffed by professional diplomats. However, you also had periods of time where you had the other way, where you had close to 70% of heads of missions being political appointees. Now, political appointees, when it came to diplomacy, at times acted against the country's interests, and at times, of course, it was understandable. But I think the ratio, when you have such a high degree of political appointees, there is a debate in terms of what impact that has on your professional diplomats and on the morale within, for instance, the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. So this is a debate that is raging in other parts of the country, and it is certainly a debate that is important when it comes to the broader public administration. You've also had recent initiatives such as the framework document on South Africa's national interest and its advancement in a global environment. And this seeks to define the principles and values that guide the country's interaction with the rest of the world. But in that discussion, it had also become very clear that a professional public service was fundamental to positioning the country favorably in a changing international landscape. And this is something that is quite important. Other initiatives have included the Municipal Structures Amendment Act 3 of 2021, which prohibits all municipal officials from holding political office and also empowers MECs to take appropriate steps, which includes the application of declaratory orders on the validity of appointments to enforce compliance. This is something that is currently being rolled out and has to be implemented, and something that will be discussed, no doubt, in future. Now, these restrictions towards those holding political office in political parties is also outlined in the Public Administration Laws General Amendment Bill, which also seeks to strengthen the Public Service Commission. And the point here is that many of the inputs that are going into this amendment bill, I think, are actually in line with what is happening in other parts of the South African state, whether it is in the Foreign Service, whether it is in the Municipal Structures Amendment Act. I think there is growing convergence around some of these measures. Also, what we've got happening recently is, of course, the Political Party Funding Act, Act 6 of 2018, which also provides legislation around issues like the annual disbursement of public money to political parties, but also provides regulation related to the new multi-party democracy fund, and also to the regulation of private funding to political parties. And these are all steps that are taking place within the broader South African state, which actually lend credibility to the inputs that have been taking place around professionalizing the public administration. Lastly, is that going back to the international environment, is that if South Africa is to play an important role in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, which have been agreed to within the United Nations, the public institutions are going to play an important role, because effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions are essential to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And this is recognized in SDG 16 and in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which basically focuses on peace, justice, and strong institutions. When you have institutions that are crumbling, when you have people that are losing faith in the public institutions, and hence losing faith in government, people increasingly resort to actions that fall outside of the constitutional parameters. They participate less in the democratic institutions. National cohesion also drops when you have institutions that are not strong and are not delivering on their mandate. Now, all efforts to strengthen South Africa's public administration should thus be seen in this context, as they ultimately enhance our own efforts to realize the aims of our constitutional order, supported by the Bill of Rights, which enshrines the right to development, which is something that I think is something at times we perhaps take for granted, because not all countries in the world have a constitutional framework that actually enshrines the right to development through, for instance, a Bill of Rights. However, that is one side of that is very important. The next step is to actually build the machinery that can deliver on that constitutional mandate. And these measures also ensure that South Africa is better able to contribute to the provision of global public goods and meet its international obligations through the SDGs. Lastly, Chairperson, is that just a quote from the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs on public institutions. It says, reinventing public administration is a positive and necessary way forward. Without public administration modernization and transformation to adapt to today's needs, realizing a better future for all will be impossible. Where capable administrations are lacking, governments are incapacitated. And where governments are incapacitated, sustainable development falls short. Now, this is very important in a continent that by 2050 would have doubled its population. And that population is mostly young people with expectations. Where will their services come from in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of infrastructure, and the various needs that societies will face across the continent? Many of the largest cities in the world and fastest growing cities are going to be African cities, but they require competent public institutions. And I think that's why the initiatives that aim to contribute towards strengthening South Africa's public administration should be supported across party lines. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. At this point, honorable members, can I open for clarity-seeking questions or comments? Can members indicate who want to speak?
Chair, I cannot raise my hands. I can't. I'm trying, but it's giving me a problem.
Okay, Honorable Mutsipe. Can I call now Honorable Mkweba?
Thank you very much, Chair. Can I close my video because my network is not fine in the village?
Okay, fine. All right.
No, thank you very much, Honorable Chair, and good morning, honorable members, and to all the presenters. Firstly, Chair, I've got a question to Mr. Terence Corrigan. I think in his presentation, he spoke about depolitization necessary for professionalization and necessary for capacitation. Can he unpack further what does it mean? And secondly, Chair, I will wish to also ask Mr. Corrigan, what kind of interventions will the Institute suggest to provide practical solutions to the challenges in the public service? And secondly, Chair, the questions to Mr. Ryan Brunet. My question is, I've got one question for him on the role of the PSC, especially in driving the meritocratic appointment in the public administration since the PSC, because clearly the mandate of the PSC, one is to investigate and monitor, evaluate the personal practice as per section 196.4, but not playing a role in the recruitment, because my problem is that, when the PSC is involved in the recruitment, therefore means it will undermine the work of the departments. And the last question, Chair, is on Mr. Erwin, because I've heard Mr. Erwin speaking about, in fact, defining the current reality as of how the ideology is to serving our own party, sectional, factional, and continuously bad government that affects the service delivery. He spoke further about what must be improved in terms of making sure that the public service is not factionalized, and how can we deal then with what he spoke about, the cater deployment as being the roads fall into disrepair. So I want to understand from him what needs to be improved to change what he have said in his presentation as the road fall into real despair. And he spoke about many things, what is happening currently in the country. But all in all, Chair, thank you very much for their presentation. Those are the only questions from the three of them. Thank you very much.
Honorable Maneli, take the platform. Honorable Maneli, it's your turn now.
I did not unmute myself. Thank you, Chair. As I was also greeting Chair in welcoming the presentations that we got today, Chairperson, I've got a number of questions, or rather clarity-seeking questions from the presentations as just presented. So I think with the first presentation, the presenter has mentioned that the bill seeks to legislate what is already in law. In fact, Chair, what is required also to reconfirm and reinforce the constitutionality, the legality, and the legitimacy in matters that are related to the profession of public service. My question thus, Chair, will be, what does it mean when you say that the bill seeks to legislate what is already in law? And also, what are the existing gaps in the current legislation implemented in public service on matter relating to professionalizing the public sector? Chairperson, in terms of the second presentation, that of race relations, what is the view of the Institute in comparing amendments by the Department of Public Service and Administration and the Public Service Commission with Public Admin Laws General Amendment Bill? Then my last question, Chair, will be in terms of the presentation of the Public Affairs Research Institute. The question should the PSC given more powers to centralize and play a meaningful role in the recruitment process of senior managers in the public administration with the aim of professionalizing the public administration? That will be my question, Chair. And also, what will be the impact of centralization versus decentralization of the recruitment process in the public administrations? Those are my questions, Chairperson. Thank you.
Can I invite you now, Honorable Mtsipe?
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. And I also like to register my clarity-seeking questions to the presenters. Chairperson, now that the bill was already legislated and then it needs to be amended, how sure are you that the new amendments will constitute this bill or will make changes? And then what was the problem of the existing bill and which clauses was missing that you need to amend, that you will think will work effectively? And then should the Public Service Act, the amendment to be aligned with the Public Finance Management Act by conferring all responsibilities of the administration to the heads of departments. And then the last one is, did the presenter take into cognizance the existing legal reforms or amendments of the Public Service Act, Public Administration Management Act, Public Service Commission Act, and framework on the professionalization of the public service? If so, what is your view in addressing existing gaps in public administration, including repealing of the Public Service Commission Act? Thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Honorable Sibisi.
Thank you, Chairperson. Can I also apologize for not showing the video? It's very bad here in rural areas. Let me join the colleagues in greetings our presenters. A concern is, I mean, what they have said, it's true. I wish to make a scenario with the Department of Basic Education, more especially at the lower levels, in the school-based promotional post or district post. So it's where the political interference is rife in those promotional posts. But I'm checking now when they are presenting what they are presenting according to the bill. Do they think about what is happening there in a lower level in the Department of Education, where posts will be given according to which union do you belong? Even the senior promotional post going to the district's post of directors and circuit managers. If you are not belonging to a certain union, definitely you won't get a promotional post. And in some other time, you will find that due to this political interference, a post-level 1 educator will be given a principal post, not being an HOD or deputy before. And that is what also causes our school to be dysfunctional. So are they still, I mean, this bill will also be practically even to the lower level, or it also specifically dealing with the departments and the municipality? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Kondwe.
Okay, let's start by appreciating the presentations that we've received today. And I have only one question for the Public Affairs Research Institution. I think his name, the gentleman that presented on behalf of the Institute was Mr. Ryan Brunette, if I'm not mistaken. Mr. Brunette, I have just one question. You state in your presentation that the model that you suggest, in response to this phenomenon of cadre deployment is built on the NDP's analysis. So my question then becomes, this very government recently admitted that it was not going to be able to achieve, the NDP goal. And I suspect
Unmute, Honorable.
I'm sorry, Chairperson. I'm sorry.
So as I was saying, this very government has recently admitted that it's not going to be able to achieve, the NDP goals, and I believe possibly, let me just say most definitely, the goal of building a capable and ethical public service. And I take the point that the NDP has, recommended, amongst other things, that the Public Service Commission be repurposed and repositioned, to assert its standing as the custodian of meritocracy in the public service. But Mr. Brunette, we're 11 years into the NDP, and to date, the public service hasn't been repurposed or repositioned. And I think, not to get into deliberations about PALGAP, this suggested, bill, but PALGAP, goes a long way towards suggesting that we repurpose and reposition the Public Service Commission. So doesn't it worry you that your model is based on this document called the NDP, that, as a country, we are not going to achieve, most of its goals, or possibly any of its goals? Yeah, I just wanted to find out what your take on that was. Thank you so much.
Dr. Schreiber, this is your bill, but I see your hand is up. I can't deny you speaking rights anyway.
Chair, why
But
would you
we-
even consider
We must
such
ask question. We must ask you today,
Yes.
not
Yes,
you asking.
I'm making no presentation today, Chair. I'm asking questions. Good morning, Chair, and good morning, colleagues, and especially...
These presentations are supporting what you are proposing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so, Chair, but just some questions of clarity, if I may, just two ones. Thanks very much.
Given you the platform, but I was not supposed to do that. Anyway.
Okay, Chair, if you think there's a problem, I'm happy to abide by your ruling. You can just indicate.
Because it's you tabling the bill.
Mm-hmm.
And we must question you on what you have tabled as a proposer, not question us yourself.
Okay, and questions of clarity to the presenters, Chair. That's the request.
But this presentation are in your support, isn't it?
But I didn't write the presentations, Chair. I just want to get some clarity, but it's not a life or death issue. If you make a ruling, I will abide by that.
Yeah, but these are presentation in support of what you are proposing.
Okay, Chair. So you would prefer me not to ask questions? Is that the ruling?
Yes.
Okay, no problem. I will take it offline. Thanks, Chair.
Chairperson.
Hello, Mama Mantuli.
I don't know. There's something wrong with my. What is this called? Icon. I couldn't raise my hand, but if you allow me, Chair, if I may.
Okay, Honorable Ntuli, you can take the platform.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. Chairperson, thank you for the presentations, and one is very much pleased to see that as the representatives of the people from the ground, we are not alone. There are some institutions that are interested into what we are doing. I wanted to thank all the presenters on that note, Chair. But moving forward to say, my Honorable Mgweba in particular covered me in some questions that I've jotted down. But I wanted to put a rider to what Honorable Mgweba asked, to say, really, I am puzzled, Chair, if I don't know, if the presenter can elaborate, maybe citing the example of the faction in government per se, and also, Chairperson, to say, I keep on hearing this cadre deployment, if maybe the presenter can also define the cadre deployment that they are talking about. Because for me, if the cadre deployment is a policy of a certain political party, I don't believe that you can be certain about it when we are outside of that party. There might be a confusion on this cadre, deployment, cadre. That's why, Chairperson, I'm really pleading for a definition of this cadre deployment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Ntuli. I have listened to all the presenters and also on what Honorable Schreiber seek to address with the proposed amendments. I don't find anyone who says this is what is lacking in the status quo. Therefore, I'm proposing this to address those anomalies in the status quo. I don't hear that. Can I get clearly what I'm trying to raise here from both the presenters and the sponsor of this debate? Thank you. Hello.
Chair.
I'm still, okay, Honorable Mkweba.
Maybe before, can we be clarified if we must deliberate to that presentation of Mr. Schreiber, or we will deliberate immediately after the presenters have responded to our questions?
If you feel that you want presenters to respond to questions first, I see nothing wrong with that. Can they do that, please? Can I get responses from the presenters on this clarity-seeking question raised by honorable members? Are we all muted now? I see Mr. Who's that? Mr. Corrigan.
Yes.
Your hand is up.
Yes, with your indulgence, Mr. Chairman, I'm very happy to start the ball rolling.
You can continue.
Okay. All right. The one question that was posed specifically to me was about my little schematic of depoliticization being necessary for professionalization, being necessary for capacitation. Look, this is what one would describe as an ideal, and I think that within South Africa's public service, you would need to do one before you could achieve the other. I don't think this is necessarily going to be the same set of challenges in any other given public service across the world. But fundamentally, what I'm talking about here is the structure of incentives for behavior. If politics plays an outsized role in the day-to-day operations, or your prospects for employment, or your prospects for mobility within the civil service, then that is going to naturally occupy the employment and the career strategies of ambitious public servants. And by saying ambitious, I don't mean anything pejorative there. I think that's good. You know, someone to go from a teller to being the director general. I think that's fantastic. But where there is overbearing or outsized political influence, your strategy will focus on that, or you will simply not see the public service as a place in which you can advance without particular political preferment, or it will be difficult. Once you have established that sort of mindset that a public servant fundamentally owes loyalty to the state and to the internal culture, it is then possible to impart skills which are not only seen as necessary and useful for your job, but are also part of the suite of skills that you are then able to offer to your position to make your to accelerate your career mobility. I mean, one of the other panelists, for instance, spoke about the Foreign Service, and for a period of my life, I worked with African governance matters, and I'd quite a bit to do with embassies, and I often wondered how many South African diplomats are, for instance, fluent in the languages of the countries to which they are assigned. Now, obviously, learning a language is just one skill that a diplomat might need. It's also a difficult and a time-consuming process, particularly when the language is from a linguistic group with which one's home language, or the other spoken languages in the country are not related. But if you are talking in this sort of context, well, first of all, is your prospect of becoming a senior diplomat or an ambassador dependent on political patronage? In which case, learning that language, or putting in those sort of hours, probably really isn't worth it, because you are going to occupy that position for a fundamentally different matter. If, however, you are in a situation in which those professional skills, professional competencies are being valued, then there is an incentive to learn that. Now, as for what interventions we would suggest, I did try to make the point in my presentation that we are dealing with problems in any sphere of governance. Naturally, will require a broad suite of interventions, and we don't, not all of them have to do with politicization, but it is a prominent issue. So what we as the Institute would suggest, for instance, is, well, first of all, it's about removing the obvious dangers, putting in place mechanisms that clarify that political administrative relationship, to say that fundamentally for the broad sweep of appointments to the public service, merit, competencies, skills is what one needs to look at. And one of the reasons why we look favorably at this particular amendment is that it does lay out some fairly firm and hard guidelines. Now, is it a total solution? Well, probably not. We, for instance, have been favorably disposed towards the idea, perhaps, of an NQF certified entrance exam. These are ideas that could be explored, and I think this is, brings me on to the question of, well, does this preempt any other initiatives? There was a request that I compare the amendments proposed by the department with this bill. Well, look, I think that we'd need to study those amendments when they are tabled. The reason that I'm speaking here today is because this is a measure that is up for formal consideration. It could well be that in future I'll be here again to support or comment on something else. As to the question of what is lacking and what is missing, which came from the Honourable Chairman, look, I would say it's not so much that anything is missing per se, but certain practices have crept into into governance practice, and it's necessary to draw a firm line and to say that these things are no longer to be entertained, and we need to introduce disincentives to some of that behavior, to the excessive political interference in the conduct of appointments and promotions, the human resource aspect, if you like. That seems to be more or less what has been addressed specifically to me. I would just like to comment on the question of schools and teacher unions and the sort of use of those positions for patronage purposes. I think that is a picture perfect example of why we need why professionalization should be of such critical importance. Education, I think the international experience on this is fairly clear, is not only about having good teachers, it's also about having good management. And when management positions are not being assigned on the basis of the ability to undertake those administrative tasks, there's a very, very serious ripple effect throughout the whole system, and I think that it hits those who are most dependent upon the upon a functioning state for the receipt of those services. And I'll leave it there for the moment.
Okay, can Mr. Brunette take the floor and respond to questions directed to him?
Thank you, Chair. I guess I'd just like to start by clarifying that I wasn't invited here as a supporter of the bill. If I were to say this bluntly, I do not support the bill. It contains useful policy in the abstract, and I've tried to point out where I agree to some extent and where I don't. But I would argue that it's not coming from a promising direction politically, and it doesn't go far enough in policy terms. I was invited here under the impression that I was merely to speak to the bill, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'll turn to the questions. I'm sorry if I don't have fully fleshed out responses to all of them. There was a lot. If I miss someone or I miss some question, then I'm very happy to circle back if the honourable members press me. The Honourable Taliswa Gweba spoke to the role of the PSC. She said that the mandate of the PSC is to investigate and monitor, but not to play a role in recruitment. And she suggested that if it plays the latter role in recruitment, it will undermine the role of departments. In response, like civil service commissions internationally and also historically in South Africa often play roles of both regulation of personnel practices from a distance, as the current Public Service Commission does, and active involvement in appointment and dismissal. In fact, that is, historically speaking, the original format of civil service commissions, and in fact of the South African Public Service Commission. There isn't a strong inconsistency between these roles, in my view. It's also the case that involvement of civil service commissions in appointment and removal decisions in other jurisdictions, and actually in South Africa, is associated with less corruption. I would argue that giving the Public Service Commission a broader role in appointment and removal is entirely possible within the South African Constitution. There's a provision in the Constitution that allows for the assignment of additional powers. And ultimately, I'd argue that it's not only a good idea, but it's ultimately the best intervention that we have to resolving South Africa's problems of corruption, of deterioration of state functions, and so on. And I think I'll leave things there. The Honourable Member Sindiswa Maneli, I'm sorry if I'm not fully understanding the question that was asked, but I'm reading it as what is my view on the Public Administration General Laws Amendment Bill. I said a bit about that at the outset of this response to your questions. I think it contains a number of useful interventions. It contains some smart legislative drafting. There's stuff there that can be used. Examples are, as I mentioned, bolstering the independence of the Public Service Commission, removing or making it invalid for people who hold offices in political parties to simultaneously hold offices in the public administration, which I understand has recently also become law at local government level. There's a range of stuff that can be used, but simultaneously, I would argue that the bill does not go far enough in kind of like checking and balancing the discretion of politicians in appointment processes. It could go further, and again, I think its prospects as a piece of legislation that will be passed are ultimately quite dim. The Honourable Mimi Gondwe, you argue, or you said, am I not worried that my model is based on the NDP, and the NDP has been around for 11 years, and government has admitted that it won't meet many of the targets in the NDP. I'm not sure about that government's admission. I concede that the NDP has been around for some time, and progress hasn't been as quick as we would like it to be. You suggested, does this worry me? And I'll suggest the reason for why not really. The sorts of public service reforms that we're all engaging with today take a lot of time. We're dealing with ultimately a large-scale social structure, a system of kind of patronage and appointments and removals, which is, which entails the livelihoods of hundreds of thousands, if not more, individuals. Such structures do not change quickly. In the United States of America, which is the major historical example of what it takes to address such a system, that example shows that this will take decades. 11 years would be very, very short to achieve the sorts of interventions that we're advocating for. So when I'm being a realist, saying that we haven't achieved all of what the NDP hopes for in 11 years doesn't worry me. My task ultimately is to find strategically ways to unblock progress towards the goals that are expressed in the NDP and in other right policy. My knowledge of how this happens in other jurisdictions is that I have to diminish my expectations about how quickly this will happen. And it doesn't surprise me at all that South Africa hasn't achieved what's set out in the NDP yet. The Honourable T.H. James, if I'm understanding, you asked what anomalies am I or is my presentation trying to address? Look, the Public Service Act and the Public Service Commission Act, in my view, need to be amended to appropriately insulate appointments and removals from the dynamics of patronage and corruption. When I look at international experience, when I look at examples of countries that have resolved the sorts of governmental problems that have emerged in South Africa, this is what we got to do, right? In my view. If we have regard to that experience, these are the best interventions that we can make. There's other stuff that we can do. There's various ways in which, like various policies that can support that move. But there's certainly stuff to do with the Public Service Act and the Public Service Commission Act. I argue that this bill doesn't go far enough, as I've suggested a few times before. We argue that, in fact, the model ought to be that the Public Service Commission is given a more extensive role in checking and balancing appointment and removal processes within the process themselves. And ultimately, we're using this opportunity to come before this committee to advocate for that. And we're very happy to discuss the various modalities of achieving that. And I think I'll leave things there. If I missed anything, please let me know.
Dr. Shwela, can you take the platform also and respond to whatever was raised to your presentation?
Yes, Chair. I was asked a number of, shall I say, clarificatory questions. And let me start with a broad systemic point. I think there's a serious need for taking some action on this phenomenon, which is about appointing people not on the basis of merit or due to their competency, but on the basis of other, mostly not stated reasons. And that maybe links to the second point, which is the point of asking clarification on what is cadre deployment. One definition might be that it is economic patronage dispensed to the individuals, in this case, if it is in the public service context in an appointment process, companies and agencies by the government, not on merit, but on the basis that they enjoy some party political connection to the governing party. I'm not sure whether one can put it any clearer than that, but the whole idea, if one then has to elaborate on that, is, and it is already said, and maybe then overstated, that cadre deployment in whichever format it comes, and in this case, when it comes in the format of impacting on the employment decision or the promotion decision, bypass merit, and it enhances control through appointments to position of power. It therefore creates patronage, and it's based upon loyalty, not on, and then I refer again to the necessity in terms of the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act. It essentially then not only corrupts the processes, but it corrupts the decision-making processes. If you are not, therefore, accountable to the Constitution and the laws under the Constitution, primarily, if there's an interference through your appointment, which is based on loyalty, not merit, which means that there's got to be some reciprocity. You've got to give something back. Then the question becomes of whether you can actually dispense in a way which is not systemically conflicted with your discretionary powers as a public servant. And I would argue you can't. So what I then, in a certain sense, introduce into the dynamics of the decision-making and the processes is a notion which says that not only is this cadre deployment defined as some form of preferential treatment, not on the basis of merit, but on the basis of party political connection, that in some ways, that in a certain sense is systemically destructive of the possibility of fulfilling the constitutional mandates in public administration, but not only in public administration. There is a strong argument to be made that one should go for the deep fundamental systemic reform of our public service and public administration, therefore. And that, I think, is very necessary, but as our colleague from PARI just said, that is a long-term effort. And I'm also a subscriber to the pragmatic approach to say, it's not either or. I have found that if you cast things in too long-term, too deep systemic notions in terms of making a difference, then it often leads to the possibility of those who want to actually do nothing, finding a way of avoiding the work and then saying, because it's so difficult and systematic, in the meantime, we have to do nothing. And that postpones action. And we need urgent and important action here. So I would argue that it's not having the deeply systemic transformational ideas into redesigning, rethinking our public administration, but it is also about, in the meantime, stemming the tide, which then creates all of these fallouts in terms of the impact of what I believe is a fundamentally stained systemic dynamic where you introduce a part of the system which then compounds the effects on the rest of the whole value chain. So I am for the bill. I was not given instruction by anybody to be for the bill. Like politicians, I independently make up my mind. And I think in those ways, and I think we should start somewhere. I think the bill provides us with a start, and that then has to connect with, which I also agree with, a longer term sustained effort at dealing with these things. And then that has to be done across the value chain. It starts with political will. I'm quite convinced that after today, most of the honorable members here will, given also the accommodations of our presentations, will express the political will to change this. But that's then at the policy level. It must go right through to say we won't do it anymore. And then if it is done in contradiction to what I argue the current legal position is, and in distraction of the ethos of a public service, then I think there should be consequences. And that has been actually argued by the Zondo Commission very eloquently to say what are the consequences of cadre deployment, defined as economic patronage, maybe even political and social patronage, dispensed to individuals by the government, not on merit, but on the basis of some party political connection to the governing party. Well, those consequences should be managed, and they should be very, very deliberately and directly called for what they are, and that is that they are essentially wrong. And then secondly, if that then, and if you go to the Public Financial Management Act and many others, that's maybe because the system is so complex and complicated. There are a myriad of even defined as offenses in all of these acts. And like with so many aspects, maybe because our system is so weakened by people who are appointed on the basis of loyalty rather than on merit, there are no consequences. So let's start with the consequences today. Let's give our full support to this bill, and then let's then continue on the path of substantive public administration transformation on the basis of the Constitution, where the public administration fulfills the section in the Constitution which says it's got to be ethical, effective, as well as broadly representative of the South African public. Maybe I should conclude there.
Can I invite you, Dr. Mthembu, if there was any clarity-seeking question directed to you, can I invite you to answer that?
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, I think my sort of concluding remarks is that, and it's also based on sort of the way our research sort of unfolds, in a sense that we try to locate South Africa in a changing international landscape. And so if there are things that bind, I think, South Africans, I think certainly the Constitution is one of those where a majority of South Africans buy into the Constitution, its aspirations, and so forth. But if there is another element, I think, that should bind South Africans, it's in terms of the type of civil service, the type of public administration that should be there within the country. I think this is also something that is important enough, but also where there has been a growing consensus across party political lines on the importance of professionalizing. From the current administration, sort of discussing renewal, discussing those types of elements, to findings of the Zondo Commission, to political parties doing very serious introspection currently, to a very vibrant public debate. I think one of the things that we should all agree on is that a professional public service is absolutely important and is in the national interest of South Africa. There's various examples from various parts of the world, many of them our key strategic partners, both in Africa, in the global south, and internationally. There were some examples that were mentioned, such as Germany, the UK, Mauritius, Botswana, and Brazil. But it's even a country like China, which is a party political state, has one of the oldest running civil service systems in the world, very professional, hundreds of years before Christ. The emperors of China saw that there was a need to actually professionalize the civil service because the emperor by himself could not govern that large territory by himself. And I think this is definitely one of those things that should also bind South Africans together, especially reflecting on the first period, sort of in our democratic transition, increasingly competitive political environment, and therefore looking to find some consensus in terms of the type of civil service that should come to the fore. And I think efforts that aim to enhance it, that aim to bring greater clarity in terms of the roles of different institutions, such as the Public Service Commission and others. I think those types of measures can only be to the interest of South Africa as a whole. And it is on that basis, I think, that having a strong civil service also places and strengthens South Africa's hand in international relations. Thank you, Chair. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will now invite further deliberations by members of the committee on on the presentation and therefore the bill as a whole. Can I see hands? I see Honorable Maneli, Honorable Mgweba, Honorable
Please go
Bol,
to me, Chair.
starting that. Okay, I will put you in.
Are you done, Chair?
Honorable Mgweba, I called you.
Is it? Oh, you called Maneli first, Chair. Or you said Mgweba? Chairperson?
Okay. Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you
We'll
very
follow
much.
Honorable Maneli after Honorable Mgweba.
Let me also thank the presenters with their responses, Chair. One wish to speak on the bill itself as presented in the previous portfolio committee by Mr. Schreiber or or Honorable Schreiber. Chair, I want to raise only 3 points that must be noted by the portfolio committee and obvious for the sake of the people of South Africa. Chair, I think professionalization of the public service, it's part of our agenda and it is needed. But however, Chair, one will wish to speak on the NDP.
Oh, settle.
I think, Chair, that the National Development Plan emphasized the role of the Public Service Commission, that it should be strengthened as an advisory role and as an oversight role in ensuring that norms and standards of the public service are followed. And it furthermore includes promoting the values of the public service and investigating breaches of procedure. And the NDP also further stipulates that the PSC needs to be a robust champion of a meritocratic public service with a stronger oversight role. And then the NDP emphasizes the role of the Public Service Commission to be an oversight role in the public sector. And then, Chair, I think the mandate of the Public Service Commission is to enforce merit-based appointments proposed by the bill, which is the bill of Honorable Schreiber. The bill, it proposes that the Public Service Commission be responsible for recruitment in the public service. However, the NDP stipulates that it would be the counterproductive to give the PSC a far-reaching direct role in recruitment, because an overly centralized recruitment system would make it more difficult for departments to recruit their staff and undermine the ability of department heads to formulate a strategic direction for their own departments. And of which, Chair, I think on that point, we must remain with the clause of the National Development Plan. It must not be changed in terms of the role and the mandate of the public service. And I don't agree with the proposed, bill of Dr. Schreiber or Honorable Schreiber that we must change that mandate of the public service. And Chair, again, lastly, the bill also infringes on the mandate of the National School of Government, which is the NSG. For example, I know that there's a framework by the NSG that will be then be presented for the attention of the portfolio committee on how we must professionalize public service, and of which now the bill, it infringes the mandate of the NSG, as it is responsible for the training of public service. And obvious, we know that it was the framework by the NSG was supposed to be presented to this portfolio committee last week, but because it was then removed as an item so that it must go back to the cabinet and make few amendments and then bring it back for the attention of this portfolio committee. Now that there is that existing framework of the NSG that clearly stipulates that the NSG be responsible for training and capacitation of the public service, not the Public Service Commission, Chair. So I think I'm raising these 3 issues so that they must be noted by the portfolio committee. Chair, thank you very much.
Honorable Maneli.
Thanks again, Chair. And also let's note the responses from the presenters, Chair. I would also like to take a bite in relation to the already presentation that was made by Honorable Schreiber in relation to the private members bill, Chairperson. Chairperson, this bill, it gives emphasis on the public service bill's independence. However, Chair, Chapter 10 of the Constitution details and provides the Public Service Commission its independence. So I wanted us just to note that, Chairperson, the fact of the independence of the Public Service Commission. And also, Chair, when it comes to the remedial action, this Portfolio Committee on Public Service and Admin, it has a very critical role to play in ensuring that the Public Service Commission proposals are given adequate attention, which I believe is something that we're doing. Chairperson, the bill speaks of enhancing the independence of the Public Service Commission, insinuating that it functions as an independent department. So, Chair, from the point raised by Honorable Gweba, Chair, it is quite clear that the role that should be played by the Public Service Commission on the recruitment. So the Public Service Commission, Chair, should play a direct role in the recruitment of the most senior post. The chair of the PSC, together with the proposed admin head of the public service, should convene the selection panel for heads of department and their deputies. Not for all recruitment in the public service, as it is insinuated by some presentations that we engaged on today. Therefore, Chair, I will then support also the move that we must not accept this private members bill and reject it. Thank you, Chairperson.
Can I call you now, Honorable Nduli and Honorable Gondwe after Honorable Nduli?
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, firstly, let me thank the presenters for their responses. But safe to say, Chair, in terms of the cadre deployment that was over the air, one notices a myth and a wrong perception in that regard. Hence, all the parties in this parliament were elected through proportional representation. And all the parties in this parliament had their own manifesto that were presented to the public to say, when voted in, that's what are they going to do. So as the ruling party, the ruling party is there to service the electorate that put them in this government. Moving forward, Chairperson, to the private members bill by Honorable Sheba. Firstly, one would love to thank my Honorable Sheba to take his time drafting this bill. That is good enough that Mr. Honorable Sheba or Mr. Sheba is part of this committee. The government of the day is in progress. There are already legislation that are talking about what Honorable Sheba is suggesting, as covered by Honorable Mugweba, to say we are going to see an overlapping of some sort task here. And also the private members bill is already mimicking the current legislation, and indeed Honorable Mugweba mentioned that NSG has the policy framework that is talking about one of the same things that are in this private members bill, in terms of strengthening the public service. And so, Chairperson, for me, I would join the previous speakers to say, let Mr. Schreiber be consistent in working with this committee and closing these gaps as and when need be. That is my take, Chairperson. Thank you very much. Oh, Chair, maybe to be precise, Chairperson, to say this bill, this private members bill, should be not really be taken forward by so saying, with what I've already alluded to. We shouldn't be taking it forward, but let Mr. Schreiber be consistent in this committee to monitor and close gaps as when need be. Thank you.
Honorable Gondwe and then Honorable Schreiber will follow thereafter.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, let me state at the outset that I support this bill wholeheartedly, and allow me to use this opportunity to commend my colleague, Dr. Leon Schreiber, for putting forward and initiating this bold bill. And he told this committee when he was presenting the bill that the spirit and the letter of the proposed bill are very much in line with some of the recommendations that this very committee has made in the House, and more importantly, the findings and the recommendations of the Zondo Commission. More specifically, the finding that the phenomenon of cadre deployment is unconstitutional and unlawful. For me, a fundamental aspect of this bill is that it seeks to prohibit political office bearers from holding employment in the public service. And it is my view that we're in the mess that we are in as a country, particularly when you look at our public service and the level of corruption that is, eating away at our public service, that we are in the mess that we are as a country because of this phenomenon of cadre deployment. Chair, you will recall that during my budget vote speech, I called on this committee to please not shoot down this bill, simply because it is initiated by a member from the opposition benches. I wish to reiterate this call to this committee and to also emphasize that if we are to bring lasting change to our public service and get it to a point where it is capable, efficient, and ethical, then we need to listen to one another and consider each other's views. Chair, I've heard members alluding to the fact that this government has introduced a number of initiatives in the public service that are aimed at promoting, capability and ethics, such as the professionalization of the public service framework. And we also heard from DPME when it was giving us feedback on the socio-economic impact assessment that it did on the bill, that even the compulsory lifestyle audits that have been recently introduced. But Chair, this framework hasn't been finalized, and there's so much talk about this framework, and it's being touted as if it's the panacea for most of the problems that are wrecking our public service. Yet, we've yet to see it being implemented. And when we turn to the issue of the compulsory lifestyle audits, I mean, you and I know that we heard recently from the Department of Public Service and Administration that the Western Cape is the only province that's making progress in this regard. It's progressed to the investigations stage of the lifestyle audit. Otherwise, the rest of the provinces are just lagging behind. So I'm not entirely sure what members are alluding to when they talk about, the fact that there's legislation and the framework is there. We have problems. The legislation is there, the framework is being touted, but the reality is that we have problems in the public service. And I kid you not when I say that I believe that most of the problems that we have is due to the phenomenon of cadre deployment. Allow me, Chair, to also emphasize some of the points that have been made by the presenters this morning, in particular, Professor Schweller and Terence Corrigan. Mr. Corrigan highlighted, the features of a capable, a public service, that it must be performance orientated, it must be made up of people that are skilled, career orientated, ethical, and non-partisan. And how are we going to do that if we're going to not look at this bill in a favorable light? I agree with Professor Schweller as well, that this bill may not be able to address all the issues that have been brought on by this phenomenon of cadre deployment, but it's a necessary first step towards ensuring that we deal with this issue of cadre deployment. It is there, it is a reality, and we can't run away from it. And so my plea today is that, this committee puts aside whatever political differences we may have and puts the interests of the country and the public service at heart. Professor Schweller also mentioned that if we continue with the current status quo and allow, cadre deployment to continue, in the public service, then the corruption continues, and our public service, is compromised over and over and over again. And I want to also emphasize what was said by Mr. Mutembu in his presentation, that a professional public service is fundamental towards positioning us as a country in a changing global and international landscape. And an effective and an accountable institutions are essential to achieving goals, that are contained in the SDG and Agenda 23, which are important, developmental agendas. So my plea today is that we put the public service first. We have serious problems in the public service. We have problems of accountability, consequence management. You know, there are problems, but to be able to get people to be accountable and for DGs and HODs to start holding people accountable, it's a problem. And I believe that it's a problem because we have an entrenched phenomenon of cadre deployment in our public service. And so I want to reiterate that this is a necessary first step towards ensuring that we tackle this problem of cadre deployment. And you know, we assist in terms of ensuring that the recommendations or the findings of the Zondo Commission are realized. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Honorable Schreiber, I noted you. And then after that, it will be Honorable Mutsepe and Honorable Tabekulu after Honorable Mutsepe. Take the floor, Honorable Schreiber.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, good afternoon again to all the colleagues. Chair, what I wasn't able to do earlier was to thank the presenters for their time and inputs and valuable insights this morning. So a sincere word of thanks also to them. Chair, I'd like to respond very briefly with some additional information on questions or issues that have been raised in this deliberation so far, and then obviously we can continue on from there. The first one is on this idea that the bill makes the PSC responsible for managing all recruitments in the public service. I think it was Honorable Mgweba who quoted from the NDP saying that that's not practical. The irony is, of course, that the inputs from the Public Affairs Research Institute was to actually do exactly that. And they felt that the bill didn't go far enough in that regard, while Honorable Mgweba is saying that it's going too far in that regard. But I'd like to just clear up very clearly for this committee that the bill does not do what Honorable Mgweba suggested. Instead, in terms of section 1964D of the Constitution, it empowers the Public Service Commission to give directions to every sector, administration and institution in the public administration on recruitments, transfers, promotions, and dismissals, and then gives it the powers to enforce those directions. It's not correct to say that it is inconsistent with the NDP. It is actually doing exactly what the NDP suggested, which is to enhance the oversight and accountability powers and independence of the PSC, and does not go beyond that. So I think that that is dealt with. The idea of infringing on the mandate of the National School of Government, because it is responsible for training the public service, not the Public Service Commission. There's nothing about training in this bill, Chair. So I find it quite strange that training would be an issue to take, or something to take issue with. There's not a single word about training in this bill. So there's no conflict with the National School of Government's mandate. And again, the principles themselves are entirely consistent with everything that we've heard, all the talk shops that we've heard about professionalizing the public service. This is entirely consistent with that, and absolutely no infringement or conflict with the mandate of the NSG. And frankly, Chair, I would remind the Honorable Mgweba that the Parliament's mandate extends far beyond any particular government department. So if Parliament wants to make a law or change a regulation and use its statutory powers to do that, then Parliament is the highest decision-making body in the country, not some government department or anything like that. But even with that being the case, there's no conflict with the NSG mandate. Then there was a suggestion that Chapter 10 of the Constitution already provides for the independence of the PSC. That is correct. That's what the Constitution says. But the entire problem, of course, is that that has never been implemented. The provisions in this bill, which will make the PSC financially independent of the executive, and which will remove the office of the Public Service Commission from the Department of Public Service and make it independent, is designed exactly in order to give life to what Chapter 10 of the Constitution says should be an independent Public Service Commission. So financial independence, administrative independence has not been implemented thus far. There are serious problems with that. I remind the committee that this very committee, in a budget vote report on the 6th of May of this year, spoke about how the Carter Asmal recommendations about making the PSC independent is very important financially and also as a quote marker of constitutional independence. It is also this very committee's own budget report, again, the 6th of May, where it said that appointment of the PSC Director General through the Public Service Act compromises the independence of the Commission. That's this committee's words, Chair. It's not my words or even the words of our expert guests here today. Those are the words of this committee, adopted in formal minutes of this committee. So it's absolutely bizarre to suggest that implementing that which the committee asks for, the independence of the Public Service Commission, is somehow at odds with Chapter 10 of the Constitution. Additionally, Chair, the idea of remedial action being the responsibility of this committee and that this committee is doing it, I think there are two important points to make in that regard. First of all, if it is entirely up to this committee to ensure that the recommendations of the Public Service Commission are implemented, then this committee is failing dismally. 80% of Public Service Commission recommendations are never implemented, Chair. 80%. Now, I don't happen to think that it is entirely this committee's job to go and ensure that each of hundreds of recommendations are individually implemented. We must hold the PSC and departments to account for implementing them. That's correct. But in fact, the reason why 80% of remedial recommendations are never implemented is because the Public Service Commission does not have the power to force or to ensure that implementation is carried through. So once again, that particular concern I find quite bizarre. And again, this committee has repeatedly, go and look at all of our reports going back for years, bemoaned the fact that PSC recommendations are not implemented. Yet here is a solution on the table to do exactly that. And then suddenly there are strange reasons being proffered for why this is inappropriate. The independence of the Public Service Commission and the idea that this is from Honorable Manele, that it should play a direct role in recruitment of HODs. Again, Chair, this is very confusing because this contradicts what Honorable Mgweba is saying, that there shouldn't be any direct role for the Public Service Commission. So again, this bill will lay the foundation for the PSC to issue directions and ensure proper oversight and accountability of all recruitment and appointment processes, but it would not directly manage all of those. That is a conversation we can have another day on that particular proposal, but it's entirely disingenuous, actually, to suggest that the bill does something which doesn't exist. I find it strange if someone even just read the bill that they would make these kind of suggestions. And then finally, the idea that there's already legislation that's doing some of these things, that is incorrect, Chair. There is no act which has been adopted by Parliament and signed by the President to do any of the things that we've been talking about, whether that is, as Honorable Gondwe rightly identifies, the limitation that says political office bearers should not work as public servants. That exists at municipal level now, but it does not exist at provincial or national level. And this bill would make sure that that is consistent. It would extend a decision of this Parliament to also cover the provincial and national spheres. And we heard all presenters today making some very informed and useful inputs on the importance of that. And that really is not actually contentious. I think that that is something that's just obvious. You can't have this kind of inconsistency. The other thing that certainly doesn't exist in law at the moment is the independence of the Public Service Commission, both in a financial and an administrative sense. Now, once again, I've outlined, Chair, how this committee has previously spoken about the importance of this. And so it is quite bizarre that now that there's a solution on the table to do that, it actually does not want to engage with that proposal. And then finally, Chair, remedial action and enforcing merit-based appointments, everything we've heard today confirms that this does not happen as per the status quo. The status quo is entirely lacking in terms of enforcing merit-based appointments, and it is entirely lacking in terms of remedial action. I refer again to 80% of recommendations not being implemented. So, Chair, you started by asking, you're wondering about the basis or the status quo that necessitates this bill. And it is exactly this, a lack of statutory grounds for enforcing merit-based appointments, a lack of a prohibition on political office bearers at national and provincial level, when that is in the case at municipal level, a lack of enforcing remedial action, and a lack of administrative and financial independence of the Public Service Commission. Those are the things that this bill seeks to do, Chair. Those are all things that this committee has spoken about, and in fact, this government has spoken about ad nauseum for years now. And so really, it will be very hypocritical and very surprising and quite shocking, actually, to then reject a proposal which does exactly that, which this government and committee have said for years they want to do. And really, the kind of blowback and hypocrisy that would expose is really quite worrying. And if that's done purely for political reasons, Chair, then we must be honest about it. Let's not come up with nonsense excuses. Say that this bill is being rejected because the ANC cannot stand the idea of the DA proposing solutions. And then at least we have a bit of honesty in this conversation. Thank you, Chair.
Don't be offensive, Dr. Schreiber. Nobody is advancing nonsense here. We are advancing views, not nonsense. Let's maintain that institutional discipline as we discuss. I have noted Honorable Mutsipe and Honorable Tebekulu will follow immediately thereafter.
Okay. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. I would like to thank Honorable Schreiber for the hard work he has shown. But I want to say that I would like to abstain due to the fact that this matter was not, this bill was not taken to the organization in order that we must deliberate it. And then even further that it was deliberated by our colleague Sarah. But I think maybe next time it will be taken into consideration so that you can able to take it further. But for now, I'm abstaining. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair.
Honorable Tebekulu.
Thank you, Chairperson. I would as well like to not to use the video because of the wind in my area and the network is not that good. Chairperson, just to follow suit on my honourable members that have spoken on this proposed bill. Chairperson, I'll be general, I must say. You know, the understanding of what is happening from local government, provincial and national, there's been a tendency, Chairperson, of this chop and changing of people in the offices of administration. Each time a political deployee comes to office, used to take or to push out those who have been in office administratively in order for him or her to bring in his or her appointees to come work with him. This, in its true sense, is a breeding ground for corruption, I must say. The proposed sort of a bill that was tabled by the honourable member, Dr. Schreiber, following the report of the commission, of the zonal commission, would have been on a positive direction to assist our government. We are now 28 years in the new dispensation. In each and every newspaper or radio station, you listen, there are reports of this chop and changing of people in administration. There are accusations or allegations of corruption being perpetrated by those in administration, politically and administratively. So my view, Chairperson, would be, although even on the side of the IFP, we have not deliberated on this bill to sort of get a clear sort of approach. But the good intention of dealing with the corruption that is taking place in our government, it's affecting mostly the poorest of the poor, who have no understanding of what is happening, except that those who are in charge, who are in offices, are benefiting, and they keep on sort of lining their pockets in some ways. So this is my take, Chairperson, that the bill actually, in my understanding, although I must say we have not deliberated on it as a party, seems to be on the proper and right direction to assist. Over and above, there is a challenge again. You know, in some of these deployments, you find that a person is an office bearer in his party and gets deployed to administration in government. Do you think if that particular person gets into the office of administration, and during the changes of elections, another party goes in, that very same person in administration would never bow down to work with the new administration political that might come into offices? So this is the biggest challenge that one has been seeing, even in national government, provincial government. You find that each MEC or minister appointed to lead the department, definitely the HOD or the director general in that office gets a chart off, and a new one is identified or appointed to come and serve. Are we serving the rest of the voters in our country, or are we serving the interests of certain individuals? That's the biggest questions I always have, Chairperson. I thank you.
Thank you to all of you for the views you have expressed.
Oh, Chair, answer soup. Chairperson, my icon I reported earlier on is not working. So
Okay, Honorable Ntuli, I will bear with you.
thank you, Chair. No, Chair, I wanted to clarify the issue of the legislation. If the legislation is already before the cabinet, we can't, as a committee, pass the same legislation. We can't, as a committee, pass the same legislation, much as it is not signed by the president, but it's there already. It's before cabinet. And that's why we were thanking Honorable Schreiber in this regard, because he is part of this committee. That means he feels the heat that we are feeling. So I wanted to say it's wrong to say there is no legislation. Legislation is there. And the legislation is for us as parliamentarians, and the legislation is for us as this portfolio committee. There are two legislation before cabinet, and it will come to us as the processes unfold, as usual. So we are not saying Honorable Schreiber is daydreaming of some sort, but Honorable Schreiber is citing the very same issues that as this committee we've been standing on toes to say, this must happen, this must happen. So there are two legislation before cabinet, and yes, it is correct, the legislation is there, Chair, and we are not just rejecting it for mere rejecting. We are saying it's duplication. It's duplicating those legislations that are already there. That's what I wanted to emphasize, Chair, in the meeting. We shouldn't be seen as a committee that we are sort of confused on these issues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Ntuli. I see Honorable Schreiber's hands is up. He wants to come back, perhaps.
Thanks, Chair. It will just be a quick one. Just on this final point that was raised by Honorable Ntuli, the suggestion that there's duplication would obviously require some kind of analysis or foundation for the claim. I've looked at what I could find in terms of other draft laws, again, nothing that's currently before Parliament, and there is certainly no direct duplication of anything in this bill. So could we get evidence or some kind of analysis or substantiation of this claim, Chair? My view is that this bill is in addition to, not in conflict with anything else that's been discussed. And my understanding is also that this is the only bill that's currently actually before Parliament. The rest is somewhere floating in the wind. So I don't think that that is a basis. If this bill is adopted, then it is actually up to the other bills that have taken years and years of talking and never anything happening for those bills to actually then fit in with this one, because this is the one that is before the committee. So I think that I would appeal for the bill to be judged on its merits. And if the merits are warranted for the bill to be adopted, and then any additional amendments coming from other possible future bills will have to fit in with the one that is actually on the table, and that's not just, as I say, floating around in the wind. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable members. We have deliberated on this bill introduced by Honorable Schreiber. There are views that support and views that do not support. My assessment is that the views that support are not more than the views that do not support. Therefore, we will note the abstention from the IFP. No, not IFP, NFP, and the EFF.
Yes.
But the overall impression is that the overall is that this bill is not supported by the committee. I didn't want to speak myself as a chair from the beginning, because I would, in that way, stifle debate. It is better to speak at the end. I want to raise this in argument, particularly this thing of cadre deployment. Cadre deployment as a concept, there's nothing wrong with it, because any political party that assumes power makes it a point that it deploys personnel from its own rank to ensure that whatever this political party that is governing wants to achieve is implemented by the people who understands the objectives of this political power, political party in power. Cadre deployment does not seek to deploy incompetent people that do not have qualification. No. cadre deployment as a concept does not seek to do that. But if there are those who are deployed who are not competent, that should be rectified, that should be addressed. I want to give an example of what happened in the past here in the Western Cape when the DA was in power here. We had a municipal manager by the name of Dr. Willis Mkoki.
Oh, yes.
When the ANC lost power here in the city of Cape Town, the DA did not hesitate to replace that qualified advocate. Why did they do that? Because they wanted to have a person that they trust in that position, a person that will ensure that he implements what the party wants. Now, as I said, I will be the last to speak, and I'm speaking last indeed. I do not support this bill as well. I add to those numbers who do not support it. With that, this bill is rejected by the committee.
Go tell Judge Zondo that.
Unfortunately, Judge Zondo is not governing on our behalf. Yes, he is the chairperson of the State Capture Commission. Yes, whatever he has raised in that report, the president will take that report to Parliament and the Parliament will debate that. By that, thank you very much, Honorable Chair. We are not
before you
trying
close, can we have Mr. Schreiber withdrawing nonsense? He must respect the portfolio committee. This is the official structure, the portfolio committee. He must withdraw that nonsense. This is a loose language. It must be in record of him withdrawing that. Nonsense. How
can you withdraw that offensive language?
Which offensive language?
To say other people are talking nonsense.
When did I say that? I said you must go say to Judge Zondo that this Parliament rejects.
No,
this bill.
I heard you. I heard you myself. I'm not. Nobody has reported that you said so. I heard you saying it.
Yes.
Therefore, I say withdraw that.
The statement about Judge Zondo, reporting this to Judge Zondo.
You have heard what I'm saying.
Chair, you must specify what I must withdraw.
The statement that you said other people are talking nonsense.
When did I say that, Chair? I said you must report this to Judge Zondo. That's what I said.
I heard you. Well, if you are not going to withdraw it, fine, but I reject what you are saying as the chair. And therefore, the decision of the committee is that this bill is not desirable at the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Mascole, I lost track of the agenda. What was this the last item on the agenda?
Yes, Chair. Yes, Chair. That was the last one, Chair.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Mascole. Honorable members, we have come to the end of the meeting with the rejection of the bill by the committee. Thank you very much. I want to raise this once again. whatever strong views we have in support or against of any matter that is before the committee, we must always respect, first of all, the integrity of this committee and the decorum of the House, because as we are constituted here as a portfolio committee, we are a parliament. We are an extension of parliament. All rules that apply to the sitting of the House apply here in the committee. Once again, honorable members, thank you very much. We have now come to the end of the meeting. The meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.